We're recording now, I take it.
Yes, we are now recording.
Great.
All right, don't
And
forget,
if you're, oh, go ahead.
Don't forget to put your information in the chat group.
And we really want this to be interactive. So in addition to questions you might have in the chat, if something that I say sparks an idea or something that resonates with you that could be helpful for other participants, we'd love for you to be able to share that in the chat. I can talk about my experience and what I've learned from others, but you are experts in the room too. So we'd love you to be able to share and start to build connections with each other that you can follow up on afterwards. Next slide. There we go. So for this morning's discussion, I'll share on the research and promising practices for what we found to be impactful for family and community engagement in STEM. So really it is like a whole village to support kids in STEM. It's families and also community partners. I'll also be focusing on ways to really lead with equity and supporting families both during and after COVID. And really thinking about not just supporting some families, but really thinking about how we really expand and support families in most need and who would really benefit from opportunities. And also look at the power of partnerships to help with opportunities and challenges, both partners that you have within your community, but also partners within this group today. And then I hope to share strategies and resources and training ideas so that if you've got an idea, you've got support to be able to help your staff do it. I like looking at some of these comments here that you're working with grand families. I really want to make the point as we talk about parents, we really are thinking about parents and grandparents, foster parents, aunts and uncles who are stepping in and mentors who are help supporting children in STEM. Oh, and I see here, Esther shared that she's got several parents getting involved in competitive robotics teams. And it is really great to see parents and volunteers helping step up and be able to support STEM programs. And congratulations, Sherry, for your daughter finishing her second term at Caltech. Wow. And a great GPA.
Yeah, it's
wow.
It's not an easy school.
Not
It's
an
really
easy
hard.
school, not an easy major. Wow.
Yeah, she's thrilled.
That's great. Good. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And Vicki shared that with her program, they're doing Minecraft and programming groups. Great new expansion. Nice. Thank you all for sharing. And one thing that I just want to make a point of, I'm going to share lots of ideas from different programs around the country. And I don't want you to think that like you've got to try and do everything. I'm just hoping that you'll see certain programs and certain ideas that resonate with your community, that build upon things that you're doing, and that your staff would be excited and able to help support, and just really don't think about being overwhelmed or having to do it all. And I also hope that some of the ideas that I raise affirm things that you're already doing, and that you can go back to your team and say, like, this is what we were talking about and learning about today, and we're already doing A, B, and C, and just really support and acknowledge the great family engagement work that you're already doing. And also, I just really want to reinforce that I really want this to be interactive, both for Susan to jump in and make any kind of comments, and Sherry too, as well as you to share in your chat ideas that you're doing. Oh, and I see David's comment about also addressing social, emotional, and behavioral lessons. And I think it's so important, especially this year, that, we're thinking STEM, but also beyond STEM, both as we think about the needs and interest of youth, but also thinking about families' needs too, that we can't just focus on STEM. Next slide. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the research. I personally love research. I've got a PhD and have done a lot of research with, blind children and visually impaired children and their families, and really see the benefit of developing programs based on research to really understand what makes a difference and how can we be most impactful. But I also know that STEM and family engagement research is sometimes really inaccessible, and it's in journals and it's very academic and articles are really long. So I'm really trying to make an effort to really pull out research, make it really simple and applied, and really think about how can we put it into practice and share it in ways that really make sense for staff to be able to make use of. Just a couple more comments on the chat. I like from Carol sharing that students can request a STEM kit each month to have sent home. That's very cool. And then the coordinator leads them in the activity. So it really is nice to think about ways that we might not have done STEM or after school before, but now we're doing more at home, sending home kits, making things available that kids can do, but also oftentimes parents will get involved with too. Nice work. Next slide. So what's really interesting is the disconnect between what parents think about themselves and STEM and what the possibilities are. When parents have been surveyed, we hear that they feel like they don't have the credentials to be able to support their children in STEM. They think that they need to have studied advanced science in class. Maybe they think they weren't very good at math. Some of them, don't have a career as an engineer, so they think that they don't have the expertise. And many parents also express a lack of confidence based on their knowledge about being able to help their child with hands-on STEM activities. So the activities that we might do at an after-school program or those that we're sending home in kits, some families may feel really scared about being able to support their child with these activities. Parents that are especially lacking confidence are parents like the mother in this slide, who was an immigrant, and English was not her first language, and she didn't have an advanced education. And yet, she was bringing her child to a community program a couple of summers ago and came week after week and was just doing awesome support for her daughter, but she didn't feel like she was able to support her child. I had a huge lesson learned when I was at Tech Bridge Girls from a father who shared with me during one of the sessions that we held for his daughter and other high school girls at Chabot Space and Science Center, where they came up over a series of weeks to help us design a new exhibit and give their input as to what an museum exhibit would be appealing for kids and families. And so he brought his daughter to the program on a Sunday morning, and then he came and talked with me and talked about how bad he felt that he wasn't able to be a good supporter or champion for his daughter. And he shared that his English skills were very limited. He worked at a restaurant in Oakland, Chinatown. He didn't have a college education and really didn't necessarily understand all the things that she was doing in the program that we had for her at Tech Bridge Girls at her high school. And yet I knew this dad would rearrange his work schedule or take time off from work to make sure that his daughter got to our program. And so he was a great champion. He just didn't realize it. Next slide. And so what research shows is that, parents like this father or like the mother in the previous slide really can have a profound influence on their children's interest and persistence in STEM, and also in their STEM identity that influences the study and career choices that they make. A professor at Florida International University, Remy Du, studied a group of Hispanic students who had majored in college in STEM and also were pursuing careers, and asked, what was their childhood like? What were the factors that made them so interested in wanting to, major in STEM and have a career in STEM? And he found that it wasn't things like going to a camp or participating and winning a competition or even doing tinkering projects or electronic projects at home, but it was talk that they had with their families and with their friends around STEM. And that conversation didn't have to be like advanced level. It was families like asking them questions, encouraging them to share what they were learning and doing. Also just encouraging them to persist when they were kind of at a crossroads and thought they might want to, drop a class or didn't think that they were very good at it. So it really, research like that really helps us think like, what are the assets that families are bringing? And it's all families can bring to the table, and help us think less about parents having a deficit. The other really important part from research around family engagement in STEM is that it's encouragement that matters most. Both looking at kids persisting in STEM and also some research that's been done around computer science and youth and especially girls in computer science. And what Bridget Barron found in doing research is that encouragement can take many forms, and parents are doing a lot of this encouragement, from maybe teaching their child something non-technical like sewing or planning a project, or inviting their child to teach and show them what they're doing. Encouragement can take the form of asking questions, helping their child find resources like one of your after school programs, or a program that might go on at the weekend in electronics or engineering that builds on their child's interest. They can also collaborate and learn together with their child. So those STEM kits that you're sending home, the parent and child can work on them together. And this really is a way for them to continue to encourage and prompt their child. And just them looking for resources, and they don't have to be the expert, but if they have a friend, or if they ask a teacher, or if they ask your staff for program ideas and ideas to support their child, this is really what matters. And the last point around research that I think is really important for us to think about, that it's never too early to start supporting child's interest in careers, and help making that connection. Parents that I've talked with focus groups that we had with TechBridge girls over the years, would often think that they didn't want to shape their child's future, or they didn't want to lock them into a career. They thought it was too early in elementary school or middle school, or some parents even said in high school, they thought it was too early for their child to making decisions about career interest. And it's not that we're trying to force kids to be a computer programmer or an engineer, but I think what we can do is look at what kids are interested in and show them the possibilities, introduce them to role models, take them on field trips where they can see what's possible. I think a message that's going on a lot is, if you can see it, you can be it. And so many of the careers, we're not exposed to, and a lot of kids, don't know what might be options and how exciting that they could be. So I think for us to be thinking about how can we make the connection between the fun STEM activities that we do and how they might connect with a career. Next slide. So, yes.
Linda, I was just going to add in, I think we had a great comment in the chat regarding with the thought around, and we'll be talking about this too, but extending that family engagement beyond just parents, but also to grand families, which, we have a lot of here in West Virginia, as well as other family members, and sort of some of the different ways that learning cycle and process of engagement can happen around STEM.
I'm glad you reinforced that message. And I think what's really important about that is that for all the materials that we're sending home, all the messages that we're giving, that we're including and being inclusive for all those different family members, extended families, other people stepping in to provide caregiving, that we're showing pictures of diverse families, so that people really feel like they're being invited. And then, for groups like grandparents, of really thinking like, what are their special needs? How are they feeling about supporting their grandchildren in STEM? It might have been a very long time ago that they did something that was science or math related, or they may think like, oh my gosh, things are so different now, I don't know how to do things, with technology. How can I possibly support my grandchild to do it? So I think of us being really thoughtful in terms of how we support those members of that extended community. And you had some great questions around, how can we make families or parents feel like they belong? How do we involve middle school and high school families? How do we make our work engaging so parents want to come? I think if we look at this example, the New York Hall of Science gives us lots of ideas and suggestions for how we can address those questions. New York Hall of Science is in Queens, and while they've got lots of folks that come to their museum, what they found was that in the immediate neighborhoods, families weren't participating or coming to their exhibits or participating in their programs after school or on the weekends. And they really wanted to be able to support families and not just make the assumption that they weren't interested or they didn't have the time to partake in New York Hall of Science's opportunities. So what they did was they listened and had focus groups and invited families to share input. It was really important for them that they had the right partners to be able to engage with families so they felt comfortable sharing. And some of the things that they heard and learned from families was that they didn't want to be involved, but they really wanted experiences to be for the whole family. They wanted multi-generational programs, so it would be, like we heard in the chat, like for parents and grandparents and for children, not just in middle school, but for older and younger kids. They also wanted programs in their native language, and they wanted to feel comfortable with families like themselves. They also shared that while they were interested in what STEM was about and how to support their child's studies, they were not comfortable asking questions and felt intimidated, especially like in school settings or even in some after-school programs, to understand like what was the STEM pathway and how would they support it. So just being aware that these families were interested but didn't know how to ask the questions and weren't comfortable. So New York Hall of Science took this input and, really created a multifaceted program. They designed programs where families could come together at the museum. They could do hands-on activities together and then also have some opportunities to do things apart. So kids could work on projects, sometimes just with other youth. Sometimes families would work by themselves and have an opportunity to learn. One thing that came out was there was maker projects going on, and sometimes families didn't understand, like, what are these design challenges or these maker projects about? Like, how does it connect with what STEM is and what you're learning? So staff was able to kind of talk about what the activities were and what kids were taking away from it and work on it together. They also provided homework help for kids so that academically, they could aspire to higher studies and careers and be academically ready for it. And they also had a nice support for career exploration. So they brought in role models. They had role models talk about the career opportunities that were there in the community. So kids could pursue technology and engineering and science and not have to go somewhere else. But could be able to, have successful and wonderful careers and still stay home and be connected with their families. And, this brought families to the museum. It engaged with families of middle school and high school students who sometimes we think are hard to reach. So it really is thinking about, like, how do we design programs that really are meeting the interests and needs of families, and really thinking about the staff and the partners that deliver it so families really do feel comfortable and connected. Next slide. So some of the ideas around like how do we listen and learn and design programs with families, I think the first thing is to really try to start with listening. As you're thinking about designing your summer programs or things that you might do for next school year with your after school programs, really encouraging your team to start by listening and getting ideas to help support what families have liked, what they might like tweaked, new ideas that you might not have thought about. And sometimes I know programs will design something first and then go to families and say, what do you think about it? So they might develop some STEM curriculum or the STEM activities in a bag, and they've already been developed, and then they get feedback from families. And while that could be helpful, I think it's a bit hard to say something like, oh, I don't really like this curriculum, or that STEM activity is something I wouldn't want to do. So if you're able to listen first, I think you can make it easier to come up with something that really will resonate with families. And then to go back over time and listen and learn and say, okay, we've tried this activity, we sent home these STEM activities in a bag, how are they working now? How might we make some changes in it? And then go back over time, because I think families will have different ideas and different feedback over the course of time. Idea number 2 is really thinking about supporting conversations and relationships with families. So it's not just getting input and listening to families on a survey or in a focus group, but informal conversations can be really helpful. I know programs like Boys and Girls Clubs that I've worked with in the YMCA groups have had staff be available at check-in or check-out time with programs. And I know this can only happen when we have virtual programs, but really in short casual conversations, they really can get to know families and start to get some insights in terms of what parents are thinking about the program and the benefits or the ideas that they might use to be able to make some changes. And I think, to do that, like the YMCA has really allocated resources to be able to support staff to do it. So one staff person is like doing the administrative work in terms of checking in or checking out, and one staff person is really just there to engage in those conversations. Idea number 3 is really check for those wrong assumptions. I've heard so many people talk about like families being too busy, or especially now being overwhelmed or not interested or having like too many other things going on in their life. I know when we started Tech Bridge Girls in Oakland communities, and we talked about the fact that we were going to have events for families, we heard from principals at a number of our schools that we really shouldn't have high expectations, and that families at their schools didn't come to family events. Luckily, that the programs that we designed, actually families came in really large numbers, and families from just about every single child that was in our program would come. So there's really ways to think about, how can we support families so that they want to come to family events, and it's really thinking about strategies to do that. And then I think the last point of just really emphasizing is that, we want to get input from families in terms of what are potential barriers for them to participate or for their child to, attend one of our after school or summer programs. And it's just as important to get their input for ideas for how we work around those barriers. I personally had an experience at Tech Bridge where we each summer had a summer program for all our girls in our after school programs. And what we would find is that we would have families and girls from certain schools attend, and some of our other schools, we would have little or no participation of the girls and families. So we talked with families, and we thought we knew what the problem was, that it was transportation, getting from their home in the summer to our after school program. So our development staff got some free resources for a family shuttle service that would drive our girls from their homes to our after school, to our summer program. And it didn't work. Families weren't comfortable sending their child off in this family shuttle program with a stranger. And we found that what we thought was a solution really wasn't. And if we had talked with families, we might have learned other ways to be able to work around that problem. Next slide. So, this year has been different. How do we listen during and after COVID when we don't have families checking in or checking out their child, at an in-person program? What do we do? I also want to lift up some ideas because I know some of you are going back to in-person ideas, so also exploring ways that we can listen and learn from families. One thing that's really important that I've heard programs talk about doing either much more or for the first time is making phone calls home and making regular phone calls home, just checking in to see how they can support their families and youth, especially being mindful of those social emotional needs that you had raised in the chat. Our program started off when the program shut down by just asking families, how are you? What do you need? How can we help you? Not just, what sort of STEM activities can we bring to you? And then really finding partners to be able to support families. They also had staff, the same staff person making repeat phone calls. So over time, they found that they were really building relationships with families, and families were, responding and answering the call because they knew who was calling them. So that was really helpful with those phone calls. And what I've heard from programs is that staff people differ in their comfort and competence making phone calls to families. Some staff are really comfortable and really good at it. Some need help and support. So some promising practices that I've heard from programs is that they have a script that staff can use and start with to make those phone calls and just have, a few prompts and a few questions. They can also do practice with one another. They can have buddy calls where the person that, feels really confident and likes making the phone calls can kind of help support and coach staff people along the way with making those phone calls. And then sharing that information across teams to really delve into, what are families' experiences, what are their needs, and how best to be able to support them. I had an experience where for our family events where I said at TechBridge, we got most families to come to our events. What was interesting was the number of strategies that we developed to be able to encourage families and invite them to our events. And I just wanted to share some of those ideas with you because they were things that we learned over the course of years. We started out by really having multiple ways of reaching out. We would send a save the date reminder card early on so families could get on their calendar and, be able to try to be available for our family night that would occur at the end of an after-school program. We also had our girls make invitations, postcards, so it was very personalized. So the families would get this great invite from their daughter, and their daughter's excitement would really generate their excitement of wanting to come. We also sent home flyers with names, and some programs have found that, if you have a flyer for an event and you leave a space where you put the person's name that you're inviting, that you have a higher rate of people attending. They feel like they're really being invited, and that personal approach is more effective of getting families to come. And we also did phone calls home. And at one of our family events at Chabot Space and Science Center, a father of a high school girl came to me and said, I got the flyer inviting me to this family event, but I didn't quite feel like it was for me. But when I got that phone call, I knew that you wanted me to come, and that's what brought him. So for me, it was such an important reminder of why phone calls matter so much. And I think also, in addition to listening to families and getting their input for family engagement, of listening to your youth and finding out, what they think would be enticing to have their family attend a family event, and the support that you could develop, having youth involved in planning family events and having them showcase their work, also being able to present. We definitely heard over the years that parents love seeing their children present and practice public speaking, and seeing how, from year to year with the practice, their kids got so good at public speaking, and they were really impressed and wanted to attend and support their child with it. And then this particular group, Ready for K, is a great resource. I have a resource handout you'll have available, and they're on it. They have great webinars, and they have a particularly great webinar in terms of getting family feedback and how to develop surveys that families will respond to. And, some of the points that they make are, one, keep it short and sweet. Only ask questions that you really need to know the answer to and will act upon. I know I was guilty of having like really long surveys and wanting to know everything, and I would definitely not do that again. And then giving families feedback on their feedback, letting them know how you took their ideas and feedback and put it into the program. If there was a reason why you couldn't do something they were asking for, letting them know why. And then being really thoughtful about who's asking and getting feedback to make sure that you're not just getting feedback from families that always participate, the families that you most want to serve that you might struggle with. Figure out who a partner or a trusted person is in your program that you can use to reach out to them to get their feedback. Next slide. So I have been guilty of this. We often focus on STEM activities with youth in our after school and summer programs. What can we do so that family engagement in STEM isn't just something we do at the end of programs or something that's an add-on when we've got the time or the resources? And I think, especially when you think about hosting a family event, we used to do it once a year at the end of our after school program, and it took so much time and resources from our staff to be able to hold it. It was kind of unfortunate because it was at the end of the program. So, families said, oh, if I had known what you were doing and the ideas that I got here, I could have been supporting my child in more ways throughout the year. So then we thought, oh, maybe what we should do is have a couple of family events. We'll do one, at the end of fall and one at the end of the year. So yes, that was good and better than just holding one, but just realizing that family engagement is more than an event or an activity, and really thinking about what do families want, and what are they, how could we support them in ways that they could support their child more? Let me just look at this one comment from Esther about mail. I love the idea of mail, and actually there's a group that does snail mail recently where, besides having things online or emails or text to families, they're sending home snail mail packages for kids and families with ideas and activities. And I think, sometimes going back to old school is something really exciting and appealing and accessible for families. So snail mail is a cool thing. Next slide. So how do we empower families and do more than those one-time activities? What I found out was that families were asking that they wanted to know what their child was doing in our after-school programs, and they wanted to know it in real time so that they could do things to be able to ask their child questions or be able to just support their child. I know a lot of kids, when they're asked, what did you do today? Will say like, oh, nothing much, or something really general that makes it hard for the parent or the caregiver or the grandparent or the aunt or uncle to be able to respond and encourage. So thinking about ways that you could provide that information. I've heard from some programs where they will send a text or an email, each week with a short summary of what kids were doing STEM related in an after school program, along with a question or two the parents could ask to build on that learning. Ideas like a role model or a book that they could build upon what was going on in the program. In terms of champion engagement at home, I think COVID forced us to go virtual and think about doing things with families at home. And I think as we think, as our programs go back to our programs of thinking about how can we continue to support STEM at home and really keeping that as part of a learning that we continue to build upon in the future. Empower families with resources. The Great Lakes STEM ecosystem came up with this great set of activities, like, simple STEM activities that families could do. And I know a lot of programs do that, but what they did was with each activity, they had a couple of nice open-ended questions that parents could ask that could guide a discussion so that you weren't just doing something, but you were learning something that was STEM related. So just adding those few questions were really great. And I think what's really important to think about is how do we make our resources manageable to families? I know David Lee had talked about summer programs. When we encourage parents to enroll their children in summer programs, there can literally be an overload of programs either in the community or online. If you do Google searches or you go to the connectory, it's like too much information. So really what, I found to be really helpful is that if you really manage it, come up with a short list of resources that will resonate with your families and youth, what's accessible by transportation or by cost or by partner where that group does really good work and kids love their STEM program or they're really connected with families. This is a program I'll recommend. So really making it manageable. And then thinking about, for item number 4 here, who can you partner with? So thinking about are there trusted members in a church or at a barber shop, at our social service, the grocery store, the library? How can you share resources or get the word out about your summer program? And really thinking about, partners here today, as well as other partners in your neighborhood and community. Next slide. So how do you put this into practice in terms of sharing research and resources? The Digital Youth Divas does a great job. When I read about them, I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I knew about them when I was doing Tech Bridge Girls, and I would have loved to do what they did. They provide programs for girls in middle school that are computer science based. And they also have got a family engagement component. So they have girls working on computer science activities, and they have families working together in workshops like this. And then they bring them together to learn and share at the end of each session. And so what's really cool is how they manage to share research. They don't come across this feeling like they're the experts and they're going to tell the parents what the research is and what it says. They took the research on roles and encouragement the parents play, and they sat down at tables with families, and the families read about those examples of what encouragement is about. And they talked among themselves about the ways in which they're already supporting and encouraging their kids and their girls in STEM and computer science. They learned from one another, and they took away ideas that if they wanted to do something else, what did they need to help support them? So they had questions in order to get more support. What was really great too was when it came down to spring and they were thinking about summer opportunities, they reviewed a curated list of summer opportunities that would be really good for their families. And they went through them and they considered what was their goal or dream for their child for summer and what were their children's interests. So then they were able to look at those summer programs and say oh, this would be a great fit. My son or daughter has really been enjoying the engineering that's going on in the after school program. Here's an engineering program that takes it to the next level. Or, I'd like to expose her to something new. Here's the program that she might like. And what was really great about this model with Digital Youth Divas is that the families were able to really network and become supporters for one another. So they were building their community and their capacity to support and learn from one another. And the work was messy. I love the Digital Youth Divas kind of shares their challenges and lessons learned that many of us have. They found that childcare was an issue, that these families had, daughters in middle school, but they also had younger kids. And so some of them said, it's hard to come to this program because I've got, a 1-year-old. What am I going to do with him? And so as a result, Digital Youth Divas provided childcare during these workshops. And they also wanted to require attendance because they saw the value of these workshops and having them over 5 sessions. But they also realized that not all families could commit to all 5. And so they went back and forth, do we require it? And then some families can't participate, or do they do the best that they can? And Digital Youth Divas with Families explored other ways that families who couldn't make all the sessions could still benefit. So having things online or having families be able to support each other. So it's kind of looking at those challenges and with families coming up with solutions. Next slide. So when you think about what families do you most want to reach and what might help you engage with them, these are families from TechBridge Girls who were up in the Seattle area. They were Somali families whose children were not attending TechBridge after school and summer programs. And the staff at TechBridge thought, what can we do to be able to encourage the families, to encourage their daughters to participate? They went to a back to school event and tried to talk with families to say like, oh, here's a great program we have. Your daughter might want to participate, but that didn't really work. And what they realized was that they needed to partner to be able to really support these families. So they worked with the Somali Youth and Family Club, which had expertise and partnerships and relationships with Somali families. And this group wanted to do more around STEM, but that wasn't their expertise. TechBridge Girls had the expertise around STEM programs and girls, but they didn't have the expertise with Somali families. So they partnered and really worked to cultivate this partnership and met over several times and came up with a series of workshops that were accessible to families. So they held the workshops not at the school setting, but actually at the apartment complex where the families lived. They offered childcare, and they really developed curriculum and activities that would resonate with the families. And TechBridge needed the help of the Somali Youth and Family Club staff to do that. And they came up with some engineering design challenges, which resonated with these mothers who had a nomadic life previously, rebuilding their homes, where they would design and redesign their homes, and they made the connection to the engineering design process in some of these activities. So it really built their confidence that they really did know and were practicing STEM. They also learned about career opportunities and great things available in their community for their daughters. So it was a really great partnership to be able to bring in families who might not have attended or participated before. Next slide. So as part of us thinking about like, how do we really prioritize equity and access and inclusion and really make it work? One is not to just count the numbers and be satisfied. I've seen plenty of family code nights or family science night where, a library or a classroom is filled and it looks great and you can give yourself a pat on the back, and it's a good first step. But also thinking about who are the families that are present and who's missing, and really asking yourself, is it the same families that are coming to all your events? Are there some families that are not showing up? And really thinking about, what can you do to change that? Number 2 is to continuing to challenge those assumptions, like, who is doing the inviting? How are you inviting people? Where are you holding events? And not give up on families that aren't coming, and really thinking about how can you make it more accessible or friendly or relevant to families. Might be doing it. I've heard some people talk about like having their STEM events at a community park in a neighborhood where they got families to come who weren't coming to a school setting. And that could be a bridge to later going to a school or a museum or an after-school program. Next is to really work with partners who can really help support you, and really thinking about who is trusted. Somebody asked a really good question about like, how do you bridge school and after school programs? At TechBridge Girls, we had our after-school programs co-hosted by someone from our staff, along with the classroom teacher. And the school teacher, along with other teachers at the school site, were so important for us for recruiting and really prioritizing equity and access. We had a teacher who worked with special ed students who every Thursday would come and see our after school program for girls and just saw how really wonderful it was. She herself was African American, and when the school year was coming to a close, she went to every African American family and told them, next school year, when your daughter's in 5th grade, we really want you to enroll your daughter in this program, and here's why. And she talked about how great the program and how wonderful it was. And some families said like, oh, that's not going to work because I have to do tutoring that day, or we have some other commitment. And she just really pressed on them that it was really important that they found a way for their daughter to participate. And she was wildly successful. I wouldn't have felt comfortable going into those families and saying like, you need to rearrange your schedule, but she had that relationship and it really worked. So really thinking about, who is the partner, who is someone at school who can really help you encourage participation of students in your programs as well as families. And then the fourth point is really keeping mindful about who's advantaged by programs and making efforts and taking action to be more inclusive. I paid some visits to a really cool maker program for mothers and daughters at a library. And it was just a really fun activity. It was really cool because it built the mother's confidence. And the mother said like, oh, whenever there was something technology or math related, I used to always direct my kids to my husband. And they said like, now I feel like I've got the confidence where I can do it. There were also role models at this program. So the girls and the mothers saw really cool role models that were doing computer science and had fun careers. But when I talked to the parents to find out how did you find out about this program or how did you register, what I found was that you had to really know about it from someone else. You kind of had to have a network, and you had to register really quickly. And in fact, as the program got more popular, within 5 minutes of registration opening, it was filled. So you had to be there on your computer at 8:59 to be ready for the 9 a.m. registration open. Well, when you think about who's privileged or who's disadvantaged by that, you realize it could be really hard for somebody to be able to know about the program or register for it. So what some staff realized was that they wanted to do something about it. So they, were more mindful in terms of leaving spaces open for families. And they also brought the program to schools in the community that were in communities that they wanted to serve. So they were investing in doing more to be able to reach more families and being thoughtful. When it comes to registration, it can be a challenge in terms of being able to know about the registration process or even know that it's competitive and you have to do it quickly. Some of my TechBridge staff were really great in terms of really supporting families to register for these fun summer programs. So they would have a flyer that was ready to, be talked about with kids and families. These are really fun programs you might want to register for. Then they also had computers available and help families with the registration process, because sometimes that can be daunting too. So, we really made a point of talking with partners who had summer programs to really be thoughtful in terms of simplifying the application process or saving spots for families that might need more support to be able to apply. Next slide. So we've got a really cool halftime show with members of your community who are going to share a little bit about their work. What I know you've been sitting here and listening for a long time. So just for a second, if everybody wants to just stand up and do a little stretch and shake, and then we'll hear from Amber and Michelle and Tanya and Walter. So stand up and move. I hope I'm not the only one that's waving her arms up in the air. Okay. Next slide. And we'll be hearing some ways that, what adjustments have been made, what are some surprises and lessons learned from this last year, and just bright spots. Michelle?
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Well, we have ridden the roller coaster just like everyone else this year. We started out thinking we were going to be in person with our programming, then it went to remote, then to in person, and then finally we ended up being fully remote this year. So we've had to make the most of every opportunity that we have to engage with our parents and our students. And so the pictures that you see here, the first one that you see with the people putting boxes into a vehicle, we have, through our partnership with Save the Children, been able to receive food distributions from Farmers to Families program. And our after-school staff have worked those distributions, and they see many of the families whose students we serve in our program, and those have been great opportunities to touch base with families, provide materials to them in addition to the food that's being provided. The middle photo there is of one of our elementary students. We have been providing take-home activity packets to our elementary students every week, and those are filled with math, literacy, enrichment, physical activity ideas, and our staff are maintaining contact with the students and their families every week. We have a very specific checklist that we use every week when we make contact with families, and we do that a variety of ways through telephone calls, social media, text messages. There's a variety of ways that we do that, but every week, and it's the same people. You had mentioned earlier in your presentation about maintaining contact, keeping it consistent with the same person, and we have done that in our program, and we have found that to be very beneficial in building relationships with the families, and that they become comfortable with the staff member who is contacting them and sharing information with them. And what you can't see in that picture is that before, early on in our program, we sent home this huge activity packet with the students that had materials in it that they could use for the activities at home. So they received a packet that had construction paper, pencils, pens, markers, crayons, tape, cups, measuring tape, dice, all different sorts of things that they could use for any sort of activity that we might send home with them. And we've been able to send those home with them twice this year. And then the last picture that you see is actually some of our family members and their students participating in a little impromptu concert that was held at a local nursing home in our county. Our teacher for this program, these are middle school students. She works very closely with students for an after-school band. And one of the gentlemen from the community who actually came and donated his time very, very generously and worked with the students, he actually became a patient in the nursing home this spring, unfortunately. And so they went to perform not only for the other residents outside the nursing home, but they also went to perform especially for him because he had worked so much with them. Unfortunately, I'm sad to say that he did pass away last week. But so we've used a variety of means to try to build relationships with parents and engage them with students.
Wow. So many interesting ideas and takeaways here. Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. I think some of the things that really resonated from what you said was really making the most of each opportunity, that it is like like a really golden moment to be able to like have that contact and relationship with families and things that we might have taken for granted, just knowing now that it's so important. Your point about partnerships, that, you know, we can't do it alone and we can do so much better when we've got those partnerships, and think about like, how do we coordinate support and services, you know, like food and materials and supplies, you know, for groups that need helps to navigate like social services, like, you know, looking for ways to be able to partner with them. I really love that idea that you talked about staff maintaining a checklist. If you're able to like somehow share that with us, I think for others to think about, like, you know, as they're thinking about like, how do you do those phone calls and like really make use of the information? Because it's like everybody could be having these great phone calls, but if you don't do something with it, like, how is that a resource like across your team and your organization? So I think that that's a really good idea. And I love the fact that, like you said, that you did have the same staff person making those calls, because it is all about developing those relationships. The other point that's so important, and you don't take it for granted, is like making those materials and supplies available for the activities, and not assume that like, oh, these are simple activities that all families will have, but really making them available. And having done that twice, as well as your kits, I think is important. I'm curious, in terms of like, how were you able to like have the resources to like make the kits and send them home?
Well, our students are in school 4 days a week, and our teachers are in school, but our after school programming is completely remote. So the teachers who typically work the after school program, they would put those materials together, and we would actually be able to give them to our students during the day to take home with them.
And did they have to think a bit differently from, you know, the kinds of activities that they would have done if they could have done them with the children together versus having them go home and do them at home?
Absolutely. And you had mentioned, and I think someone else mentioned in the chat about sending letters home with the students. You know, every week teachers are providing letters home to parents, you know, explaining the activities that are there and how they need to, you know, how they can support their child in completing the activities. So yes, they did have to think about the activities that they chose.
Do you feel in some ways like, you know, with that extra communication, like telling the families what was going on, that is like an addition that your staff hadn't been doing previously, that they might continue to do?
I do. I mean, I think they've always communicated in some ways with families, but if there is a silver lining, I think one of them is in all of this is that there has been, I think, even greater communication with families than there has been in the past. And I think that is something that we will look to continue in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing. It was really, really interesting and helpful. If anybody has comments or questions, if you can put them in the chat, and also, you know, if we can turn to you at some point in the future, Michelle, as a resource, to just kind of hear more about what's going on in the future, and especially as you transition. And the point about like having to flex and do so many different things is a big challenge, and just kind of recognizing that. Thank you for sharing, Michelle.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Great. Next slide. Hearing from Amber. Thank you, Amber Glenn, for sharing with us now.
So, good morning, everybody. Boys and Girls Clubs is in the Eastern Panhandle, so we serve Jefferson, Morgan, and Berkeley counties. Way back in March, wow, a year ago, you know, you were catching wind, and we, like Michelle, started making phone calls to our families, and not just to say, hey, we're shutting down, but really to start saying, hey, what do you need? And those weekly calls started to turn into, kind of, we're worried about food. We're worried about tutoring. We're worried about different things. So those calls kind of, they grew into something much more. And now we're still talking to those families on a regular basis, and we're seeing a good majority of them weekly. The bottom right picture, we started out with a 5-pack meal kind of event, much like the schools do. Schools were doing breakfast and lunch, so we decided with our food program, we were going to apply and we were going to do dinner and a snack. 160,000 meals later, we are still doing dinner and snack. We started out, if you look at the picture right above it, we started out packaging in to-go boxes and talking to our families every week. They're like, we don't have space for this. So we changed. We do a bulk meal family style pack now. But through it all, our first partner was WVU Extension. And they packed the STEM kits and we simply sent them home. Every kit had its own directions and all the supplies that were needed. And we had such great feedback with that, that we started another project I'll talk about here in a second, but Panda Express is a great partner. And they supplied 3 brand new books, an Cinch Sack backpack, and also a meal for our kids. So we were able over the summer to build at-home libraries with 3 brand new books for every single child. And this all went out in our meal packs every single week. And they were all, we worked with our parents knowing the books were coming in, and we found out grade levels and age groups. So that we could really make this meaningful for our families. We also we have a local organization called Healthy Berkeley, and they wrote a small grant and they partnered with Boys and Girls Club. If you see down in the bottom left corner, this is our local farmers market. And every week we would back up our vehicles and they'd bring out pallets of fruits and vegetables. We worked with our staff to get our staff's favorite recipes. And we put together little recipe books that went out every week, along with the fruits and vegetables for our families to cook at home. So all along, we're sending home these great engagement activities for at home because we couldn't have it, at our site. That was actually the entire summer. And some of the cool things, our families got Asian pears. Our farmers market sent us these little green plums and these little purple plums, and just tricolored corn and things that our families had never seen before. But the other side of that, we were able to promote the triple SNAP benefits and going to your local farmers market. Towards the middle of the summer, we have a community foundation in the Eastern Panhandle. And then one of our Rotaries sponsored a club in a bag. So we were able to take all of our club activities that we do and make them into small scale mini projects for the kids. So if we do tie-dye, they had something to tie-dye, just the right amount of tie-dye in little cups, and the instructions to do tie-dye at home. We had STEM, we had rec, we had mindfulness. Our teenagers, we had a mini canvas and paint. And one of our instructors got on our Google Classroom and they were able to do a paint night with our instructor. But everything was in this kit. And the top left picture is actually of one of our directors went out and they got to see the kids as they literally went to 250 kids' homes and delivered these club in a bag. From there, we started to notice at the holidays, we're worried about food insecurity all year long, but really what's going to happen over the holidays. And we found several families that needed holiday meals, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we partnered with our local motorcycle clubs And these guys went out and again delivered, I think it was 100 Thanksgiving meals and 100 Christmas dinner meals. So they delivered the meal kits. In doing that over Thanksgiving, they found out that several of our families didn't have the basic things for the holidays, like a Christmas tree or decorations. So our community came together and found these items for our families. We were also, through a generous donation, able to give every kid a brand new pair of shoes through our meal packs. So all of this has really happened because of us serving meals, all of our engagement. Now that we're a year later, we've built those relationships and we've actually had to add staff to our pickup times because our families, the kids get out and they talk to us and the parents get out of the cars and they talk to us. And we were having families come in and we were running out of staff to hand out meals. So we had to bring staff in because our families want to talk to us. This is their time to engage with us and for us to engage with them and see their needs. We've partnered with another local community agency and everybody is getting Easter eggs. Just the little plastic Easter eggs. They're going to get a pack of those, for an Easter egg hunt that's coming up with their kids. And the organization actually got little meal coupons to go with them as well. So if they wanted to stuff their Easter eggs, they would have little coupons to go ahead and put in them and not have to worry. And then we're working with our local conservation district for a gardening project, and we're going to build their take-home egg carton pizza garden kits. So everything is already ready, soil, seeds, everything to build, all your herbs, your tomatoes, your peppers, to go ahead and grow those things so you can build your pizza kits. So they're going to provide that, and then we're going to provide some of the stuff later on, when things start growing, to make those pizzas at home.
Wow. Those are so many great ideas. I have to say, Amber, I got goosebumps when I heard about the Panda Express and the books in the backpack. A really cool idea. And I think what really stood out with your points was one, the power of partnerships and forming new partnerships to really help support your families with their needs around meals. And I loved hearing about the motorcycle club, being able to get out to families and deliver, where they then saw what were additional needs that you might not have known about and been able to address that. I also loved about the Rotary Club and having those mini projects. So I think it's really, I've seen programs where throughout the past year, foundations or partners or groups that you might not have had in the past really want to help support. So you've got the need identified and the way to help support families, and they're able to kind of come in and help with it. I appreciate your mention about getting more staff to be available because kids and families want to talk with your staff. So definitely you've got those relationships built, and the fact that you're recognizing that and putting resources to be able to help support and encourage those conversations is great. So many great takeaways. I look forward to being able to share them with other groups outside here. And I really think that everybody that's been part of the directors meeting today are taking away really cool ideas to be able to help support their teams and programs. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.
For sharing. Next, can we hear from Tanya Clark? And if Walter's here too?
No, Walter bailed on me because outside of him being our technical facilitator, he is also the database manager of our COVID-19 vaccine team, and they are in Beckley this morning. So I do have Edna Green here with me, who is the project director. So I'll be talking, but if she needs to chime in, she will do so as well, because I was expecting Walter to be here. So, but if
thank you, Tanya.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. But basically, our program, what we've done, just as everybody else, how COVID has affected how we run and do things. We started early in the year after COVID first hit. We started with our computer literacy program for grandparents, because in our country, there were so many of our students who are being raised or cared for by grandparents, and they were calling and expressing their need for help with knowing about how to maneuver around Schoology, knowing how even to get on Schoology. I mean, they were just struggling. So it started off us planning to have a computer literacy program where they actually came in the building to learn different skills as far as maneuvering around Schoology and just computers in general. But it ended up that we ended up in houses actually going to them and just giving them those quick lessons, just so that they would be able to assist their grandkids while they were at home with them. So that was one of the things that we started out doing. And then of course we started doing meals for our students off the bat, because we knew that, once again, with our community, we knew that they depended on those meals. That not only the students, but the parents as well. There was parents who were actually calling us, asking for food, asking were we able to provide them. So we were doing lunches, but we were also providing some parents with actual meals that would last them a couple of days. So we did those things as well. And then as far as having a virtual summer program, it was a success, but we did learn some things as well as far as our summer program. But we did it virtually. We had all the information on our Facebook page, so the parents would know what was going on that week for that particular week and the activities. And we also supplied the students with all the materials that they would need for that particular week. So it wasn't like the parents had to go out and find things themselves. We actually provided the students with everything, and they would go on our Facebook page, click the link to participate in the virtual summer program. We had Miss Hogan, who provided us with a wellness program also during our virtual summer program. So it was truly a success. The students enjoyed it. And because, the majority of our kids need academic interventions and support from our program, we also had 2 certified teachers who started right after school ended, prior to our virtual summer program even starting. We had 2 certified teachers who was tutoring our students virtually throughout the summer until basically until they were ready to go back to school themselves, and they were not able to do it, because we wanted to still continue to assist those students and meet their needs and continue to help them excel. One of our brightest spots, though, that we're excited about and we're looking forward to jumping in. We've already sort of started it, but one of our most exciting points is we've obtained the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact Grant, which we used our Girls Who Code program as leverage to do so. But basically what we intend to do is take coding into the churches and to the community centers, but of course, starting in our program first, but parents and family members will have access to Microsoft certifications. They will receive laptops based on their needs and their achievements in our program. If need be, we will pay for their internet and whatever needs that would need to be met for them to be successful. What we're going to do is we're going to create a database for at-home jobs. And that's what because as you see, this is the world that we live in. A lot of jobs are now being done at home, and that's what we're going to do is help them to have success in the at-home world, that work at home world that we now live in, and provide them with whatever needs and that would help them meet that. So it's both economical and STEAM for our families.
Wow, Tanya, great sharing. Thank you so much for sharing all the work that you've been doing. I think a few of the things that really stand out for me is like your point about supporting the computer literacy for grandparents, and doing that both in home. And I really feel like those sorts of lessons like would be really important and helpful for grandparents. And I know, as things go online, it's not just access to a laptop or to the internet that families need, but having tech support to be able to make use of it. So kudos for you doing that.
Thank you.
And then also to the point about tutoring and providing academic support, I think is so important too. Thinking about, like we want kids to be excited about STEM, but if they're really struggling academically, it may be hard for them to be able to participate in STEM. So having those certified teachers providing academic support. I heard of another program too that did tutoring, and they actually enlisted some college students who wanted to volunteer and do some extra work and support their community. So, if you're thinking about having support for tutoring, you can also consider, in addition to teachers, possibly college students who might want to volunteer.
Yes, we do that as well with students from West Virginia State University. We're doing that as well right now.
Fantastic. And then a big shout out and congratulations for getting the Microsoft Social Impact Grant. It's great that you were able to leverage your work with Girls Who Code. And then the fact that you're supporting families with laptops and internet if needed, but also too the fact about looking to develop the at-home job capabilities for families. So when you ask, not you personally, Tanya, but like, when people ask like, well, what does it take to get a family engaged in our family engagement work? Doing something that's so relevant and important for them, like helping them get the skills to get a job, that's going to bring families to your program. So it's really wonderful to hear all the things that you're doing. I didn't know if there was anything Edna wanted to add. Tanya did a great job sharing.
Thank you. She's shaking her head no, so I'm
okay. That's fine. Thank you so much, Edna and Tanya, for all this information on your program. It's really great. And also to connecting with churches, I think is important as we're thinking about like places and partnerships for different community members of including churches in that mix. Next slide. So you definitely had questions in your information about yourselves in terms of like STEM activities, what are cost effective, what are family friendly, what are virtual ideas, how can you get high school parents involved, and definitely some of the ideas that were raised by our three speakers touches upon activities and ways to make them accessible to families. When we talk with role models like scientists and engineers and kind of hear from them, like when they were young, what got them excited and involved in STEM and kept them going, it's often simple things like taking something apart, messing around in the dirt and the mud, playing. So it doesn't have to be like really complicated, cost-intensive, deep activities to engage kids in STEM that really sparks their curiosity and makes it easy for families to engage. So just kind of having that as a reminder. Next slide. So how do we make STEM, easy and relevant and lasting? I think one is to really think about like, how can we build upon family routines and what families are already doing and what their expertise and interests are. So, thinking of being able to tie into baking or cooking or repairs. A lot of our families, use STEM to repair appliances or work on the family car. Dancing or drumming or quilting are activities that families partake in. So thinking about how can we not have families do something different or extra, but how can we engage in activities with families that are things that they're already doing and things that they're expert at. and really thinking about that. I love the idea in terms of thinking about that pizza garden and, for families that like to garden or grow things, an activity like that is really a great way, and having all the resources available to do that is great. Next point is thinking about connecting, back one, connecting activities to career exploration. And I made that point before that when I talked with girls at TechBridge Girls, what I would often hear would be they would say, I love these activities. They're so much fun. I love doing them, after school and summer programs, but I don't see myself having a career in STEM. And they weren't making a connection between the activity and a career possibility. So for us to just be really mindful about what can we do to be able to facilitate that. And it's really thinking about who are role models that you can bring in. And it could be a professional in STEM, but it could also be somebody that's in college or in high school or one step beyond your students who could be a role model. Field trips are also great ways to, make that connection between STEM activity and a career. And then thinking about how do you tie that into families, because I knew at TechBridge Girls, we would have like role models come to our after school and summer programs for the girls. The girls would go on field trips and get to meet lots of role models. And the parents would say like, these sound really interesting and exciting. I wish I could be there. And even if they couldn't be, we could think about like making videos and having clips from the field trip or from the role model visits that parents could see, to be able to help them see the connection to careers and to role models too. Think about virtual field trips. I know during COVID, there's programs that are offering them, and thinking about how that's something that a family could engage with together. Third point, and I really want to strive to make this important, is really thinking about supporting caregivers to support their daughters or their girls in STEM. Oftentimes, parents want to do best, but sometimes don't think that their daughter is interested in STEM. So if they're thinking about a summer program, they might think for their sons like, oh, there's this robotics or engineering project or science club or camp. I'm going to enroll my son in it. But they don't think about their daughters, or maybe their girl didn't ask for it either. So I think also being mindful that girls can like STEM camps and programs when given the chance, especially if they do it with other friends. So just being really mindful about encouraging parents to encourage girls in it. And also to think about partnerships. Like if the kids in your program are having a really good time in STEM, what can they do outside your program on the weekend or after they graduate from your program? Where's another program or a resource or a person that they can go to be able to continue to fuel that interest in STEM, and really being mindful of it. A few places that do really cool STEM activities that you can look at in the resource handout are Technovation, which does really fun projects for families. And they also have some great information about growth mindset, about helping families realize that you want to encourage persistence and help kids feel okay, like making mistakes and not getting things right the first time, and having parents and grandparents and relatives feel okay about not getting it right the first time, that it's all a part of learning. And then also thinking about other organizations that you might explore. Power My Learning has activities where kids learn a lesson and they teach their parents at home. So it's kid teaching parent, not parent feeling like they have to know how to do it. They're taught by their child. And there's also a cool project called the Postcard Project, where when the child was participating in a summer program, they made a postcard with the photo, or they could draw it, of something that they liked in their summer project. And they had a couple of prompts, and they say, I learned, and then they talked about what they learned, and then they had a prompt to say, I want to learn more about. So it gave the parents some information in terms of what the kids were doing and learning, and how they might support them and take them to the next level. And also too, now that like people are starting to think about summer planning, to think about parents and caregivers asking classroom teachers or after school staff, what's my child really interested in or has talent in or might be interested in? And where might I go to be able to support that interest in helping them plan their summer based on input from a classroom teacher or from after-school staff? Next slide. Scientific Adventures for Girls is based in my community in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they've got after-school and summer programs for girls and co-ed programs in the summer for boys in elementary school. And what's so cool about them is their whole approach to family engagement, that they are constantly trying new things, doing more, learning, not giving up, tweaking things. I love them because they're a great partner with me, so I can test ideas with them and encourage them, and they try things out, and then I get feedback from them. And what they do as part of their after-school program that meets once a week is, like some of you have mentioned, they send home emails and texts to families to say, this is what the girls have done. Here's a couple of questions that you can use as prompts. Here's a couple of books that we read, because they connect books with STEM activities that they do, and a great way to help support families. This past year, they've gone virtual. So what's been interesting, like some of you have mentioned, with new partners, they're able to serve families and kids in a new way. They actually have more programs. Now that it's virtual, they can be in communities that they couldn't before. They're getting more volunteers and more role models who want to be engaged. And just last week, they had this virtual event for Women's History Month, where they had role models do some hands-on activities in a virtual family STEAM night. So kids got to learn about watersheds and make soap with their families. And what I realized from that event that I listened in on was that, you know, to schlep to a family event that's somewhere out in your community at the end of the day can be hard after a day of work, or managing your family, or dealing with dinner and childcare. I mean, it really is a lot easier to just get on your computer and do a virtual event. So, you know, there's something to be said for, you know, continuing to do some virtual events with families to just make it easier and more accessible. And then the last point I just want to make about Scientific Ventures for Girls is they also do the phone calls. So once their in-person program shut down, they started making those phone calls. And, you know, like you all have mentioned too, those phone calls are so important for building relationships and really learning and supporting families with what they need. Next slide. So what do we need? What do you need to sustain family engagement? You know, really is a core practice woven throughout your network. And, you know, so it's not just that one-time event, but if we're trying to do more, what does it take? This slide is of a wonderful teacher who helped with special ed students in San Francisco, who was also helping in a summer program. She was part of a 10-week series over the course of a summer for families that weren't getting a lot of STEM opportunities in their community. And there were just lots of lessons learned from this program where, you know, what we discovered is that, like, it's not necessarily easy doing in family engagement. It really takes time and resources and planning and support. And a few of the lessons that we learned from this project was that, you know, you've got some staff that are really competent and confident in doing STEM activities, but really don't have confidence in talking with or interacting with families and need support around that. Then you've got some staff like Edith, who's in the slide, who's really good with family engagement and is just like a really great partner with parents who lacked confidence in STEM, and in fact got involved in doing this technology project only because the volunteer who was supposed to lead it didn't, so she got stuck doing it. But what was great was that with support, she developed her confidence and then went back to her special ed kids and started doing things in computer science with them and took them on field trips and brought back what she was learning. But it's really important to think about, like, for staff that are young and don't have a lot of experience communicating with families, of really thinking, like, how can you really support them and help them? I think the other takeaway we learned was that, you know, this was advertised as STEM activities for kids, and some family members came to the event and were kind of standing off in the back or were on their cell phones. And what we realized was that we needed to really promote and really nudge families to be involved in the activities with their kids. And that really required staff as they came to say, like, communicate the message that you're going to be working with your child. And if we saw them off to the side, to really help give them a task or a way to be able to engage more in a really positive way so that they felt okay about it. Next slide. So what are the kind of resources? Really, like I encouraged you to listen to families to find out, how to do your family engagement. Really listen to your staff to find out what do they want and need, to see like what are their ideas for family engagement and kind of building on their interest. And then what are the resources and training that they need, and who within your team can be the leader and help support different areas of training and support for family engagement. If they're making phone calls or are having those conversations when families pick up things, who in your staff is really good at that, who can help support and train others to do that. Next point is, offer training for youth and caregivers with disabilities. Oftentimes when we talk about equity and diversity, we think about economic diversity or racial diversity, but we don't often think about disabilities or talk about it. So it's really important when we're marketing of really thinking about being inclusive. If you know of families who the parents have disabilities or youth have disabilities, to really personally reach out and invite them and be supportive for them, and find out, if your staff needs support to be able to help have a youth with a disability in your program, get the support to be able to do it. I help support after school and summer programs for boys and girls at the California School for the Blind. And I have to say, of any of the STEM programs I had, the ones that were most impactful were with the youth who are blind and visually impaired, who had so many limitations placed upon them and were so left out of STEM activities in their STEM classrooms because they were blind, because of people's expectations or stereotypes. But when given the chance, they were so excited and engaged. So I really encourage you to think about that, and really think about like, who can you work with? Really think about partners, ones that you have, new ones, who within this group can be a partner for you. We've heard from 3 groups who are really doing awesome work. I hope we can rely on them for some partnership support, and really give staff.
This is from her ROTC class. Is that something that?
And really think about like, how can you empower staff to try new ideas, to really give them freedom to do it, to affirm what they're doing right and what they've done in the past, but also not be afraid of them making mistakes. I think with all our family engagement work, we've learned lessons. I know Tanya mentioned she learned lessons from what she's done the past year, and really letting staff like learn those lessons and be able to tweak and do things differently, but not to be afraid of not getting it right the first time. And some of the things that we've done, in terms of like supporting training and professional development is, having a book club, having some readings that are around family engagement that everyone in the team reads and discusses, having somebody on staff that like loves research and wants to be like the chief research officer who can kind of gather that information around STEM and after school programs and family engagement that can bring back and share with your community. Next slide. So in practice, Imagine Science of Orange County did an awesome job with their summer programming. They formed a community of practice so that they worked and learned together with groups that included some boys and girls clubs, YMCA, Girls Inc. They shared and developed curriculum for the summer together and also did professional development. So we had a community of practice and met over 6 months to kind of talk about family engagement. We had some readings and reflections, and we came together and talked and shared and learned from one another. And it was just really great to see them being able to take some of the ideas from the readings and the sharing, try them out in their summer program, pick just a few ideas that they wanted to build upon with their staff, and then try them out. Everything didn't work smoothly, but they learned lessons and then decided what they could do. One of their biggest successes and takeaways was that doing family field trips was really cool. Families loved it, going to a museum with their child, with staff. It was a great way to be able to do STEM and explore STEM in a new way with their families. A lesson learned was that they developed some resources for families throughout the week. So they had a take-home activity. They had questions each day. They were supposed to go home in a print copy with the child to their family. And what the staff learned at the end of the week, at the end of the summer program, was that not all families knew about that. Not all families got those handouts. And so their takeaway was, in the future, it would be really important before the program starts on the first day for staff to be able to talk with families to say, as part of this program for your child, these are things that are going to come home. These are things that we're going to do with the family, and just to be able to support them in that. Next slide. First of all, I have to say thank you so much for being attentive for such a long time. I'm sorry that I talked so long at you. And definitely, wish that we were together and it could be more interactive. But now let's take a little coffee break. Sherry, do you want to let people know how long they have?
Sure. Is 10 minutes enough? It's 10:31, so everyone can just stay on the line and mute yourselves and come back in about 10 minutes, and then we'll do our breakout discussions.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you,
Thank-
everybody.